Welcome to today's webinar titled Get to Know the New Interactive Map of Adaptation Actions. This webinar is made possible with funding support from Natural Resources Canada through Canada's Climate Change Adaptation Platform. My name is Suzanne Sealing and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. I am an Adaptation Extension Liaison at the Climate Risk Institute. I will be available during the webinar if you run into audio or technical issues. To ask me a question, click on the chat box, find my name in the drop-down menu of participants, and then send me a direct message. Please note that your microphones have been automatically muted to avoid any audio distractions or feedback during the webinar. There is a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but that doesn't mean you have to hold your questions until then. Please feel free to type out your questions during the presentations in the Q&A box. The chat box is also available if you would like to submit comments. Additionally, if you would like to ask a question using your microphone, please click the raise your hand icon and we will unmute your microphone. We welcome questions in the language of your choice. Official language of your choice. We are recording the webinar today and we will be sending out a link to everyone who has registered along with a copy of the presentation slides. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. First, we have Valérie Côté. Valérie holds a graduate degree in urban planning from Université Laval and an undergraduate degree in physical geography from the University of Guelph. At Environment and Climate Change Canada since 2015, she started in climate change adaptation policy and transitioned to the Canadian Centre for Climate Services in 2017 to work with Canadians providing information and support for adaptation decision-making. Our second speaker is Casey Klunis. Casey has been a policy analyst with the Canadian Centre for Climate Services at Environment and Climate Change Canada since May of 2018, where she works on outreach and engagement files. Casey holds a Master of Climate Change degree from the University of Waterloo and a bachelor's degree in environmental studies, as well as a diploma of environmental assessment from the University of Waterloo. And we also have Joanne Egan. Joanne is a senior advisor in knowledge mobilization with the Climate Change Impacts and Adaptation Division at Natural Resources Canada. She's leading knowledge mobilization for the Canada in a Changing Climate, the National Knowledge Assessment. This includes activities around strategic communications planning, engagement, and production management. Joanne is an experienced science communicator with a flair for adapting complex scientific and technical information for specific audiences. On behalf of everyone joining us, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our speakers for presenting this webinar for us today. And so without further ado, I will now turn things over to you, Joanne.
Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me to just begin by saying, as a virtual event, we are gathered together across the traditional and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of everyone who's in the National Capital Region, I acknowledge that the lands on which many of us are gathered are part of the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And I welcome all of you to use the chat if you wish to include your own land acknowledgement from wherever you are today. So I'm going to begin by just talking about how we came to have the map of adaptation actions. We began, at Natural Resources Canada with a new approach to the national assessment. Any of you who have used national assessment reports in the past from the IPCC or from Canada, Government of Canada, know that they traditionally land as a big brick at the end of a long process, and they're quite technical. For this cycle, we decided to take a new approach, more plain language writing, more figures that you could download instantly in high res or otherwise, infographics, things to make the content more usable in your contexts. And we're delivering all of them at changingclimate.ca in a digital format, in addition to the usual PDF format that will still land as a brick on your desk at the end. So one of the things we heard loud and clear is that people want a lot of concrete, on-the-ground examples of adaptation in action. So every chapter of the national assessment contains case stories. It's kind of a made-up word, but it's like a case study, but it's short and non-technical and contains the same kind of real-world examples of adaptation you would find in a longer, more technical case study, I should say. as we were conceiving of the digital delivery of our reports, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if people could use the case stories that they've been asking for as a way to enter the reports? So how could we organize all the case stories in a single location, maybe on a map, where people could click on the map and see what they're looking for. And then that would be their doorway into the assessment reports to discover the other information that surrounds the case story. As we were having those thoughts, our colleagues at Environment and Climate Change Canada at the Canadian Centre for Climate Services were having the same thoughts, because of course users across the board have been asking us for case studies. How can we find them? How can we search for them effectively for a decade or more? So the Canadian Centre for Climate Services was also planning an interactive map of case studies from a range of sources, not from the assessment reports, but from folks across Canada who've been producing case studies for years, but the same kind of real world on the ground examples of adaptation action in Canada. So in what I think is kind of an unprecedented government first, we decided the two departments should work together on a single place where you can arrive and find everything that you are looking for. So this has been a really useful experience. We consider it kind of a learning by doing exercise, which is going to help support whatever other tools are coming next. One thing we've heard loud and clear is there are many tools out there. How do they all connect together? How are they the same? How are they different? This is a longer conversation that we're just beginning now. And all of the work we've done on the map has really helped us crystallize important issues around that. And then also all of the feedback that you're going to give us today will help with that as well. As you know, the Government of Canada has undertaken a process to develop a national adaptation strategy. And that strategy is underway. We can talk about that later if you wish, but it's not the purpose of today's webinar. But all that to say, it is going to provide an impetus for some bigger discussions about how people find the climate change case studies and other information that they need, how they can search for them and all of that. And we are ready for that conversation because of the work we've done on the map and the feedback that you're going to give us today. So my next slide, please. So just to summarize the objective of today's webinars, we intend to demonstrate the functionality of the map, find out more about you, who is using the map and how you're using it, hear from you about what you think of the map and how it could be improved. And don't be shy, we really are looking for feedback on improvements. We want to also explain to you how you might make your own submissions of climate change adaptation examples to the map. So I will now hand things over to Casey.
Great, thanks, Joanne. So I am going to walk you through a bit of an exercise for us to gather feedback, as Joanne mentioned. So I want to start off by kind of explaining a little bit what we're going to be doing today. So you'll see on your screen a question right now. So what we're going to be doing is using a software called Poll Everywhere. So some of you may or may not have used it before, but this is a tool that we use to gather audience feedback in real time. So as you can see on your screen already, you're able to see the results of everyone who is participating, which is really fantastic. So we have this question, what role best describes your area of work, up on the screen right now, just as kind of a warm-up question to get used to the tool. So I'll let you know, if you haven't already, how you can connect. So you basically just need to open a new browser window. So you can do this on your computer, you can do this on your phone, and you navigate to pollev.com/cccs, which you can see at the top of the screen there. There's a second way you can connect via text by texting CCCS to 37607, and you will get text prompts to lead you through. I would highly recommend using the browser version. It is a little bit quicker and a little bit more straightforward to use. But of course, if text is your only way of connecting, do feel free to use that option. So I see a lot of people have already connected, which is fantastic. As I navigate through the slides, you will see the questions change automatically on your browser screen. So don't worry about changing once you've navigated there. And I will also just say, if you are a bit slow to connect, if it's taking a little bit of time, feel free to jump in whenever you do connect. You don't have to be connected right from the start to answer questions. And I will also just mention before we move on to the next one, if for whatever reason you're unable to connect to the Poll Everywhere, Do feel free to use the chat if you're comfortable. No obligation whatsoever, but if you want to jump in the chat, you can do that as well. I'll also mention, if you are choosing the other option for this current poll question and you feel like you would like to share in the chat, also feel free to do so as well. So it looks like things are stabilizing a little bit. I'll let it stay up for another second or two while people get their answers in. But we can move on to the next question. So you should see it automatically switch on your screen. But the next question here is, how do you use examples of adaptation in your work? So for this question, it is a multi-select question. So if you find that you have used multiple of these different answers, different ones resonate with you, please feel free to select more than one. So we're kind of interested, obviously, in the main reasons that people are using adaptation examples in their work, using case studies in their work. So we hope that this will kind of help guide us as we continue to improve the tool and refine the tool and make it all the better for our users. And again, if you've chosen other and you are comfortable, do feel free to type that answer in the chat. So it looks like a lot of folks are using examples, which is really great to see. I'll let it stay up for another second or two while everyone gets their answers in. All right, as it's starting to stable off, you can move to the next question. So this question is, what type of information would you be most likely to use from examples of adaptation action? So I'll first mention that this is an open-ended question, so you're welcome to type whatever it is that you see fit. With this question, we're looking to understand a bit more specifically what it is that users are looking for in an example of adaptation action or in a case study of this type. So whether that be information on risk assessments, impact assessments, identification of specific actions, information on the implementation processes for those actions, all of these things, none of these things, we're just interested to hear exactly what it is that you are looking for. And again, this information is just going to help us improve the tool as we move forward. It's very valuable to hear this type of feedback from those that will be using the tool. So I'll leave it open for another couple seconds. Before I pass it along to Val, who will walk you through a demonstration and speak a little bit more directly to the map, I just want to note that there will be a few more questions throughout the presentation. So I invite you to keep that browser open. And then when we navigate to the poll questions that are later in the presentation, they should automatically appear for you there. So I'll just give a couple more seconds. It's great to see lots of participation in the poll. It's fantastic. All right, so I will pass it over to Val.
Thanks, Casey. So before I go to the demo, I just want to use a quick moment of your time to speak to the high-level purposes and objectives of the map, to complement ultimately what Joanne has already mentioned earlier on in terms of the kind of the scope and the silhouette of the map. So ultimately, the map is a one-stop shop where decision makers and action enablers can easily explore many examples and find links to additional and useful resources, including, for example, climatedata.ca, the climate action map, reports under the national assessment process, and other useful and insightful sources of information. So visitors to the map, users of the map, are able to find or able to search hundreds of examples in an interactive and user-friendly fashion. They can use a number of filters and keywords to refine their findings. And the map ultimately provides a lot of really critical and insightful information on the implementation processes. It also is an opportunity to create a peer-to-peer learning venue, so everyone can have a sense of what is being conducted across the country. And lastly, another really important feature of the map is that there is a really simple online web form through which users can submit their own suggestions of initiatives and projects. And I'll be getting to where that is located at exactly in just a moment. So my next step is to share my screen. Thanks, Casey. Just going to, are you, yes, okay, thanks, Joanne. Excellent, okay. So we thought that to help us kind of demonstrate the different features and functionalities and different types of content on the map, we would do a bit of a use case. So I'm going to be pretending throughout the demo to be a planner from a municipality situated in Manitoba in a town, rural setting. And what I'm ultimately looking to do is to understand the different types of options that my municipality has to address the flooding risk or a potential flooding risk on our territory. And so I'd like to come back to my colleagues with a number of ideas or options that we could decide to pursue moving forward in terms of addressing that particular flooding risk. So try to keep that general storyline in mind as I walk through the map. So in order to access the map, I would go to changingclimate.ca. And this is where, as Joanne mentioned, we have all the reports of the national assessment process housed. So if I bring your attention to the very top banner, you have a quick idea of the structure of the website. So you have the home section, you have the reports sections where all the reports are situated, and you have the map of adaptation action section. I also can notice at the very top right corner how there is an English interface and a French interface to the map. And what that means is that all the content in this map can be found in English, and it can also be found in French. So if I look further down the landing page, I see that there are a few yellow tabs. One that seems to take me directly to the map, which I will do in a moment. But before going to the map and exploring case studies, I'd like to understand a bit more about this map. So I can select to go to the About This Map tab. That opens up a window where I have contextual information on how the project came about, who was involved, and most importantly, a section on frequently asked questions. And so I can explore those questions to understand how were case studies selected, how I can submit my own case study, how the filters can be used and how they were developed. And here at the very last question, any other kind of additional information, sources on climate change impacts, data, and other case studies. If I decide to go to the other tab, the Contact Us tab, this now opens up the simple web form that I alluded to a few minutes ago. So I can use this web form to get in touch ultimately with the team supporting the map. So I can direct an inquiry, any type of inquiry. So we have a few categories here to help, but so any question, any feedback on the map, and any suggestions in terms of case studies that I would like to have included on the map. So now that I have kind of a good understanding of how this map came about, I understand how to use it. I also know where I can get in touch with the team to help me maybe have additional support. I will move on to the map. And so this is where, what I decided to do was scroll down the screen, but I could have pressed on the yellow tab here and it would have brought me to the exact same place. Once I scroll down, I then see the map, and I can have a really, I can have an overarching picture of all the number of case studies that is made available currently made available on the map. I can also decide to use the few high-level filters here. So we have one that says see all case studies. So this is the view that you currently have on your screen. It gives you all the case studies, but you can also select to see only the case stories from the Canada and the Changing Climate report. Now, going back to my storyline, and for it to be useful in my particular context, I'm going to decide to stick to the see all case studies view. That said, I still want to refine a bit of my search at this point. And so I'm going to turn my attention to all the filter categories here on the left side. I'm going to start by going through the climate issue filter, and I'm going to select flooding. I'm also going to go under the sector filter and select community, because that is my area of work principally. I also want to note at this point that some sectors have sub-filter categories to further narrow the search. And then I'm going to jump straight to the type of setting, because I'd like to start my exploration and my research by looking at case studies in a prairie setting. So what you see appearing right now on the screen is a result of, demonstrates, what I want to say is that it demonstrates case studies that relate to flooding, are in the community sector, and are in the prairies in terms of setting. So what's important to note here is that the filters are additional. And I could have, if I wanted to go dive even more further, I could have selected a filter under the adaptation stage. I could have selected something under the type of action, or even use keywords to further help. So, but since I'm just starting, since I really just want to explore, get a sense of what's out there, I'm going to go to Manitoba. I'm going to start with going to the same province as where I'm located. And I'm going to go on the little bubble here, and I have a pop-up box that appears. And in this pop-up box, you have the title, but you also have a very short snippet that gives you an idea of what the case study is about. And being that this is of particular interest to me, and I want to know more about this particular case study, I will click on the arrow here, and that will bring me to the case study standalone page. And this is where you have the bulk of the information. So you have, again, the title, you have a short description. In this short description, I can understand what are the climate impacts being addressed, what is the action that was undertaken, and what was the outcome of that action. I also have on the right hand side here all the tags related to this case study. So that allows me to really understand what other elements are being covered by this case study, and also kind of a sense of the potential for co-benefits that were addressed within this case study. I can also see right from the start who was the case study lead, right here below the box. And being that the short description is super interesting to me, I think it's relevant. I think it provides a sense or it provides information that I could potentially use further in the future. I'll just scroll down the web page, and I'll come to see that there are some headers that each contain further information. And the headers allude to the adaptation planning cycle. And under each of those headers, you can find information such as what was the approach undertaken to understand and assess the impacts? Who was involved in identifying the actions? Was there any engagement conducted? What was the implementation plan like? What were the main themes being addressed? Were there any key considerations there? And then if you go to the outcomes and monitoring progress, were there any lessons learned in what has been implemented to date? Are there any efforts to come back to that and review that in the future, review the actions? And then you also have a next steps box. And this is where I would be able to understand what's next in terms of actions, or in terms of the adaptation plan, or in terms of the monitoring stage. I think everyone is aware that adaptation is not a linear process, but rather is an ongoing process. So this is where information such as future considerations by the case study lead would be captured. And then finally, there's also the resource box here, which is super interesting because it gives me a link to the full case study, but it also gives me links to all additional and relevant information that I could decide to explore if I wanted to know more about, let's say, the methodologies that were used, or if I want to explore another resource of library, another library of resources. So now that I have taken note about the approach undertaken under this case study, the actions that were undertaken, I'm going to go back to the map and try to see if I can look at another case study or another case story. And so I'm going to go to Alberta, and I will go to the dark bundle here. And so all case stories within the map are in dark blue, and all case studies in the map are in light blue. And so I just really want to show you the value of the case study. So I'll click on the title of this one on the top here. As I can see in the title that it relates to flood. So already that captures my attention. By clicking on the title, it brings me to the standalone case story page where you have the title, again, a short description, all the tags related on the right hand side here. But I have a button here that says read the full story. So by clicking on this particular button, that brings me to the location, or it brings me to the report in which the case story is housed. And this is super interesting because then not only do you have, a description of the actions that were undertaken, but you have all the content found within the Prairies chapter. And you can see here on the right hand side how the chapter includes many different sections that relate to climate impacts and adaptation measures in a prairies context. So that is really helpful to me because I can use that contextual information to guide my future work since I'm located in the prairies. So I will go back to the map. So now that I have taken note of an approach in a case study, some information in the case story alongside key findings of the Prairies chapter, at this stage, I want to actually broaden out my search a bit to see what else is happening across the country. So what I will do is I will clear my filter. I will go back to the climate issue, select flooding. And being that I'm broadening a bit of my search at this point, the geographic location is not of importance for me right now. So what I'll do is I'll actually go to the list view. And then that will bring me to a full list of all the case studies and case stories related to flooding in Canada. And what's particularly interesting is that I have the title, but I then see all the related tags. And so I can decide to go through this list and identify which case studies I think could be relevant to my context and useful. And then, so once I've done kind of exploring and taking note of the different actions, methodologies implemented elsewhere in the country, I feel better prepared to go back to my colleagues and put forward an initial proposition on the types of approaches we could undertake, the types of actions we could consider, and that kind of allows me to have a constructive conversation with them and allow us to kind of move in a forward direction in addressing flooding risks in my municipality. I'm done for the demo. I will turn it back to Casey at this stage.
All right, just bear with me a second while I reshare my screen. And just a thumbs up from my colleagues when you can see it would be fantastic. Oh, try this again. Nothing?
we can see this previous slide.
Okay.
So we're good. We can see the slides, but just the wrong.
Okay, that's perfect. All right, so as promised, we are returning to some of the poll questions. So this next question is, what keyword or words would you be most likely to use to search for relevant examples of adaptation action? So this question is a word cloud format. So short or one word answers are kind of the best here. If you have something that is like 2 words that you would like to show up together as one, for example, ice cream, I just recommend connecting them with a dash or a hyphen so that they show up together. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with word clouds and how they function, but you know, as people submit the same answer, so for example, here water is showing up really large, it just kind of indicates that a lot of people are submitting the same answer or are interested in the same things. So this is really fantastic. We are really interested to know kind of the main ways that users would like to find the information, the main ways that they themselves would go to search for information. That will really help us kind of improve our filter and search functionality specifically. But it also just gives us a sense of what topics people are most interested in as well. So this is really great. There's a lot of awesome words here. Flooding is emerging as a clear front runner here, which is not surprising. This is usually a really popular one, so I'll give it another second or so for people to get their answers in. All right, I'll move on to the next question here. So considering your potential use of the map or your use of the map, if you already are familiar with it and using it, I'd love to see a rating of general usefulness. And so I see some answers already. I just want to quickly say 5 we consider more useful and 1 we consider less useful. So just consider that as you make your rating. So obviously with this question, we're just looking for a sense of, you know, how useful people think the map is, whether or not they think it would be something useful for them in their work, or just general usefulness. So it seems to be skewing towards the useful end. That is nice to see from an audience of potential users. All right, looks like it's stabilizing. So now I will hand it back over to Val to speak to some of the next steps for the map.
Thanks, Casey. So what you've seen today is a result of our phase 1 of the project. So now we are in phase 2 of the project. And the main objectives for us is to just continuously improve. So specifically what that includes is improve the query functions of the map. So specifically the filters, try to make that more accurate through time. Build connections with other useful resources and websites that provide similar type of information, that provide case studies or information on projects. To maintain the content on the map, to make sure that that's relevant through time, that updates to the content is applied when the implemented actions advance. But more importantly, we want to add new actions to the map. For multiple reasons. One being that we want to continue to increase people's awareness of what's being implemented across the country. We want to continue to increase the provision of insightful and useful information in terms of implementation. And we want to address some of our gaps in our current coverage. So we're very much aware that there's a lot more happening across the country, and so we want to be able to address those gaps and provide an honest picture of what's happening across our regions and sectors. So I'll just use this as an opportunity again to remind everyone that if you go to the map, in the Contact Us tab, you can connect with us by filling out a few fields and putting forward your suggestions in terms of projects and initiatives. I've already noted a couple of questions in the chat, wanting to get a bit more information on that, so we'll get to that in the Q&A period. Next slide, please. You can also expect a few updates and next steps in terms of the national assessment process. So as each report is released under the Canada in the Changing Climate National Assessment Process, we continue to link embedded case stories rather to the map. So not all chapters are released at this point, so watch out for individual chapters from the Regional Perspectives report, which are releasing individually as soon as they are ready. So next up is the Atlantic Provinces chapter, releasing in December, so that's upcoming soon, followed by Quebec, Northern Canada, British Columbia, and Ontario. We also have the Health of Canadians in a Changing Climate report being released by our early 2022, and which is led by our colleagues at Health Canada. And finally, you can also expect a report on Indigenous resilience led by Indigenous authors. So back to you, Casey.
All right, so just continuing with a couple more poll questions. So this was touched on briefly in the beginning of the presentation, but essentially we're interested to know what other tools or resources that you are aware of that provide similar information to the map of adaptation actions within a Canadian context. So again, this one is an open-ended question, so feel free to type anything that comes to mind. And I'll just note that we have connected with a number of others who are working on similar tools already to learn best practices, connect with them about the development phase. It was really helpful for us as we were putting this together, and basically find ways of connecting our work to reduce the duplication across platforms. And so we found that knowing what all is out there and what all is available is half of the battle. So if there are any other tools that you think we should be connecting with or aware of, we would really love to hear about them. And I will also just note that this question will be on the follow-up survey that you will receive that is related to the webinar as a whole following this webinar. So if you do happen to think of something in the next day or so, you're more than welcome to include that answer on that form. Right. So the final poll question for today. Do you have examples of adaptation action that you have worked on or are aware of that you would like to see on the map? So this alludes to what Val was just talking about. So we are really looking to understand how many of our users have these examples that they would like to contribute to the map for inclusion. So it looks like there's a lot of yeses, which is really fantastic. So if you have seen, or you will have seen, Val showed the Contact Us form on the website itself during the demo. So you can connect with us that way to share with us the specifics about these examples. You can also connect with us via our email, which I will share at the end of this presentation. We would love to work with you to develop these examples and get them onto the map. Moving forward, we want this to be a way of gathering content for the map. So I will also just note that this question will also be available on the follow-up survey. So if you want to share any specifics there, you are also welcome to do so. Okay, so there is one last question. This is not a poll question, so you won't see this one appear on your screen. But we just wanted to ask if audience members would be interested in participating in a more focused user feedback session in the future. If you are, we would invite you to please send us an email, again, to the email that I will share on the last slide of this presentation, or the Contact Us form on the MAP website. just with your name, contact information, as well as just a quick note referring to the session and your interest in that feedback session. So we're considering holding these more focused sessions to sort of drill down into what it is that the users are looking for in order to help us improve and refine the map, as well as its features and functionality. So the feedback we received through this webinar is a really great start, but we want to be able to dive down a little deeper just to make sure that we're getting it right. So again, if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us. I will share that contact information at the end of the presentation. And I will also just note that this question will also be on that follow-up survey. So it will be there to remind you when you receive that. So that is the end of the poll questions for this session. I will now pass it back to Suzanne to kick us off with the Q&A portion.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Great. Okay, very informative. We have about 20 minutes left for question and answers. So again, if you have any questions or comments, now is the time to type them out. We did receive some questions when people registered, so we'll address those as well as the mix of those that have come in today. So our first question actually comes in French. So, les outils liés au changement climatique sont nombreux. Certains se développent. D'autres outils sont aussi en cours de développement. Pour les personnes responsables de la mise en œuvre des mesures d'adaptation, la multiplication des outils développés de manière non concertée n'est pas souhaitable. Est-ce qu'une harmonisation et une coordination des outils a été réfléchie?
Suzanne, je suis contente de répondre à cette question et je suis contente de pouvoir répondre que oui. Donc, on comprend qu'il y a plusieurs outils disponibles du même genre, par exemple une carte interactive avec des exemples de projets, initiatives, que ce soit en changement climatique ou en adaptation. Et on a eu plusieurs questions aussi qui nous demandaient quelle est la différence entre un outil et l'autre. Et donc, suite à ça, ce que nous avons décidé de faire, c'est de contacter les divers outils disponibles à travers le pays pour justement trouver une façon d'essayer de mieux diriger les utilisateurs de ces différents outils. Donc, je ne sais pas encore quel sera le résultat final de cette coordination-là. Mais tout de même, je voulais préciser que c'est quelque chose qu'on considère et puis qu'on va essayer de travailler avec les autres opérateurs d'outils similaires pour organiser nos efforts et diriger les gens dans la bonne direction. So I'll just also translate my response, just being that it's a question that we've seen in the chat and in the poll answers. But the question was, there are many tools available similar to this one. How do we understand the differences between the different tools? It's a bit confusing. Where do we go? And so the answer is that we are trying to address that particular component. We have connected with many similar mapping tool operators or websites, and I don't know what the end product will be at this stage, but I'll like to say that we've kind of all agreed that it would be in our best interest to help users understand differences between the platforms and help users navigate from one platform to the other. So all that to say, stay tuned, and we will be able to address that concern moving forward.
Merci beaucoup. Okay, next question. You did touch on this a little bit throughout your presentation, but perhaps you could repeat if there's support for users to submit a case study.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. So For the phase one of the project, one of the criteria that we've used to select the case studies was that the information had to be publicly available for us to essentially build a foundation in terms of the content to be presented on the map. However, in our phase two, we are moving into an area of more of co-development. So we are doing interviews, we are having dialogues and exchanging with case study leads to build the content. I'm also saying this because we have the luxury of having a great project team with us supporting all of this great work and all of these co-development approaches. So my suggestion is get in touch with us, put forward your project, and we will be able to, generally it's a case-by-case scenario, and we'll be able to assess with you what is the best approach in terms of developing the content needed to appear on the map.
Good. Okay, thanks very much. All right, continuing on, we have a question that came in today. Is there an ideal project size for documenting on the map, the online map?
It's a good question and it's a hard one to answer, I guess. But maybe what I can do is speak to a bit of the criteria that we've used so far in kind of to help us scope the work of the map. So for instance, we have decided to include projects, initiative, actions that demonstrate climate change adaptation, but also enhancements of resiliency. So it's a bit, sometimes a lot of the work that we do is not considered adaptation, but contributes to adaptation resiliency. So we are open to that. We have decided to include projects after 2015 as a way to kind of try to keep things recent and relevant in our current kind of climate impact context in Canada. And we've decided to focus on initiatives, projects, and actions that are implemented or that we are aware is under implementation. So I know that I think there was a question alluding to that as well in the chat. So a lot of what we have on the map is either implemented or that we are aware is under implementation, and hence it will be on us to follow up in the near future to see, what are the next steps after the particular action has been implemented or is done in their implementation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So on that note then, is there a way to select for projects that have actually been implemented and evaluated rather than those that are underway or planned for implementation?
Yeah, well, my best suggestion, and I'd be open to having Casey or Joanne jump in. I feel like I'm taking a lot of the spotlight, but my suggestion would be to default in using the adaptation stage filter as a way to guide your research, as a way to guide your findings. That particular filter breaks out the different stages of the adaptation plan. And in that you have implementation as a stage, you have monitoring progress as a stage, so on and so forth. So I would invite you to look there as a first criteria in your research. Okay.
Well, we may as well keep going if that's okay. Okay, great question. What's the plan for mobilizing this useful information into the broader Canadian community?
I think I will leave that one to Casey because she's been leading our outreach and engagement efforts.
Yeah, that is it's a really good question. I think, you know, first and foremost, we are excited to be doing webinars like this. We want to share this as far and wide as we can with the adaptation community. We have done a few kind of similar things in the past, or have kind of piggybacked on others in the past, and found that it has really helped with increasing the traffic to the site. So we'd love to continue you know, with this kind of outreach with various groups that work in adaptation, climate change at large, that kind of thing. We are focusing on some social media. So we're working with social media at ECCC, Environment and Climate Change Canada, as well as NRCan, as a way of promoting some of the new examples that we add to the map. So that's one way. We're also just leveraging our connections. We at this Canadian Centre for Climate Services sit on a number of different working groups. We have different meetings and things with stakeholders such as provinces and territories. We want to leverage these as a way to just kind of get the word out and encourage our partners to be proactive in sharing this with their constituents. So that is the plan. That is what we're hoping to do moving forward. And as we continue to add new content, we think that that's a really good way to continue promoting our content. I think one last thing I'll just add is that we've also been trying to get the map into a number of different newsletters that reach a lot of the adaptation community. We found that that has been really helpful in boosting traffic to the site. So again, we're always open to, if anyone has any newsletters that they think this might fit well in, we'd be happy to share a little blurb and a link to the site there. Go ahead, Joanne.
I'll just, it's a little duplicate, but I'll just add that under the context of the national assessment process, we also have a massive network of amplifier organizations who are already very engaged in sharing content from the reports and about the map, and we'll continue to reach out to them. So that includes our National Advisory Committee, all the lead authors, and a big network of organizations from engineers to planners to, you know, across Canada, municipal officials that are always, you know, ready at the drop of a hat to take our content about the map when there are new stories that go in, for example, and share those with their audiences. So that amplifier strategy is key to how we're communicating about the assessment and about the report.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I wondered if we have a couple questions about various maps that are available. So for example, Kara is asking if you'd consider connecting it with the climateatlas.ca map. Perhaps you could just explain the difference between this map, the climate action map, and the climate atlas, for example.
I can give it a shot, and it's good practice for me. So if we take, for instance, the climate action map, that particular map is more of an approach for the federal government to provide a sense of their funding in terms of climate action at large, so mitigation, adaptation, clean tech, so on. And it's a useful raising awareness or communication tool. So it doesn't provide a lot of detailed information on each of the actions or projects or initiatives funded by the federal government, as opposed to our map, which dives into a lot more detail and highlights the methodologies, approaches, resources, people involved. And then in terms of the climate atlas, we are connected with them in terms of trying to figure out how to best coordinate and connect moving forward. So there's a bit of work that's going to happen there, but I think the Climate Atlas is great in terms of, especially in terms of their storytelling format. So they have a lot of interactive products there, videos, infographics, related again to many different types of actions and sectors. So they're doing really wonderful work. So we're trying to see if there are ways that we can amplify each other's content, link to on each other's content, describe the differences between our two maps so people can understand, you know, where they should be going. So that is my answer at this stage.
Okay, great. Good, good. Okay, I'm going to try my hand at another French question. Quelle est l'échelle des actions d'adaptation que l'on peut partager? Est-ce que l'échelle d'une roue est acceptable? So in other words, they're asking, what is the scale of adaptation actions that can be put onto the map?
Any scale. We do really, oh, en français, pardon. Donc, toutes les échelles sont bonnes. Toutes les échelles sont bonnes, mais c'est sûr que le plus que l'échelle est petite, le mieux c'est en quelque sorte pour nous, juste parce qu'on aime vraiment avoir des détails pointus sur les actions qui sont mises en œuvre sur le terrain en quelque sorte. Ceci étant dit, je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de crédit à avoir des études de cas sur une plus grande échelle parce que ça demande souvent plus d'acteurs, une coordination autre, c'est un contexte complètement différent. Mais toutes les échelles sont acceptables. C'est pas obligé d'être sur une région, ça peut être au niveau d'une rue, le changement d'une rue, la surface de la rue, etc.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Okay, we'll keep going. We have just a couple more minutes left. Okay, a question about how case studies are updated over time and, for example, as projects move through the adaptation phases, how are those updated or are they updated?
Yes, so our intent is to update those as they move through the adaptation cycle, and that is being done again with the support and expertise of our project team. So it does require some work on our behalf to go back to the case study lead, inquire on whether the action, if they have any updates to bring, any new components, any subsequent kind of steps in their process. We have been proactive to some extent in which internally, we have a really good sense of which one of those they are and can go quickly back. So we have kind of an internal tracker mechanism. So we know where to go next and who to go to. So it'll be on us to do that part of the work in the next few years and do that on a kind of an ongoing basis or a regular basis moving forward.
Great. Okay, and then more about sort of navigating the map. Is there an option to zoom in on specific smaller geographic regions, for example, the Greater Toronto or Hamilton area, to see to identify adaptation actions for locations of that smaller scale? I think we mentioned the scale, but this would be more for navigating the map.
Casey, do you want to give that one a shot?
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that one. So yes, so when you navigate to the map, it kind of shows you that high level bubble with the number of case studies per province or territory. So once you select that little bubble, it'll zoom you into the province or territory, but then on your right-hand side, there will be zoom options. So you can zoom in, and for example, for the GTA, there's obviously a lot going on. It's a really big metropolitan area, so there's a lot of little bubbles in that area. So as you zoom in, they kind of spread out and they are associated with whatever location they're in. So there's no limit on how far you can zoom in. Yeah, I think that more or less answers that.
Good, good. Okay, we're getting close here. I want to just do two. So Annie's asking if there's a carbon storage and sequestration section included in the map or the report.
I can speak to that if you like. I just answered it also in text form, but we really are trying to keep the map very tightly focused on adaptation and resilience types of projects. So projects that respond to and address the impacts of climate change, not projects that deal with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we would consider carbon storage and sequestration, CCS, to be a technology or an approach that's entirely about mitigation, reducing emissions, not about adaptation, so it would not appear on this map.
Okay, that's very helpful. And again, we're getting a few questions about how much time it takes for users to upload their case study information, how they can enter the data themselves. But I thought maybe it'd be important to reiterate that users don't do it themselves. Is that correct?
Sorry, I was finding my mic icon. So that is actually absolutely correct. It's not to say that that will never be an approach of ours. Maybe sometime down the line we'll have a really in-depth web form where people can do it on their own, and there's kind of a validation process on the back end happening. But for now, it is for them to get in touch with us, and we can help with the next steps.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we don't want to go too much further past the hour. So, okay, so I'll just get you to flip to that last slide there.
Sure, yeah, and I'll just note,
sorry.
if anyone is looking through the slides, there's a couple on the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. If you're interested, it just speaks briefly to our services and climatedata.ca. But I just wanted to take a chance on behalf of myself and my colleagues to thank everyone for joining us in the webinar today, and especially thank you for participating in the poll questions. Your feedback is really, really valuable to us. To hear from potential users or people who already use the map, that's really great, that's really valuable. We're going to use that moving forward to improve the map and kind of refine the features and functionality. So you can find our contact information on this slide. The website URL is there. At the website, you can find the contact form where you can get in touch with us. On the right-hand side, you'll see the email address for the MAP team. So please feel free to email us directly if you have any outstanding questions that didn't get answered today, if you want to provide any more feedback. If you want to participate in those focused sessions, please reach out to us. Or if you want to submit your own example that we can work together to develop, please feel free to reach out. So I will end it there. I'll say thank you again, and I hope that everyone has a fantastic rest of their day.